Hi, I'm Michael Neville. I'm a Bosham Parish Councillor, and I'm pleased to present in response to the virtual workshops that were delivered by Highways England in the first week of February. The triggers for my response are threefold, primarily born out of a sense of disillusionment really following the presentations and the design package revealed in those presentations. Secondly, a concern around some poor local coverage on the project recently. And thirdly, the identification of a significant missing link between the design team and the local need. A lack of understanding of the dynamics of the communities and any potential user of the improvement package. For transparency, this is very much an individual response rather than a full parish council response at this stage, and therefore it will be somewhat unpolished and unguarded delivery. What I hope to do, I guess, is to really try and dovetail the technical elements of the route with that user experience, and in my view, it should be that local need that is driving the process. I hope as a result that local authorities and Highways England will start to show a genuine commitment to active travel rather than the half-hearted tick box offers that we're presented at this stage. So if you've got a spare 45 minutes, I will get going. Apologies, the project evolved into something much longer than I anticipated, but that's where we are. A couple of questions to address before I start looking at the design features. Why should I care about the project so much, and secondly, why do I consider myself in a position to offer such an opinion? I care for a community angle and for a personal interest, but my academic background is in population health, and I'm only too aware of the need for such projects to succeed and the impact that they can have on communities in a public health sense. So considering statistics on obesity, on type 2 diabetes, and most importantly, given the fallout from COVID, the impact that active travel can have on addressing mental health issues. Environmentally, this project is huge for Chichester. Chichester is failing in air quality in certain areas, and looking more widely, certainly not going to go into a climate change conversation here, but we need to be driving in and out of Chichester less than we are at the moment. The personal interest is built around that, and a project that our family feel is unfortunately very much on the edge after more than a year of ditching the conventional family transport, so selling up on the car and moving to a car-free family. We found the challenges incredibly hard in this area. There's a bus ticket there from Bosham to Chichester, which comes in at over £12 for a single trip. But it's not the money for us. It's more the safety element and the fact that we just can't, with a young family, justify any more cycling the roads, cycling within the villages, let alone venturing further afield to Chichester and beyond. So there's a real personal element to this project. We've invested a lot of time and consideration into trying to bring about a huge lifestyle change as an environmental statement, but also to model an active way of life. And the fact that project is on the edge because it's such a struggle doesn't seem right. So active travel for me is the silver bullet, and the more projects that we can bring about that encourage active travel, that make it the default setting for short journeys, the better place our communities are going to find themselves in. So the second question is, why do I consider myself to be in a position to offer an opinion? And maybe I'm not, but the photo on the left there is taken in southern India during a 1 year bike ride, a 16,000 mile bike ride that started and finished in Bosham. It took my wife and I through 40 countries, and on those 16,000 miles you learn about risk on the road, and you get the opportunity to observe different attitudes to different modes of transport, how people can share space and move in a safe and active way. You understand the risk, and you understand structure of transport systems, and you get the opportunity to talk to people about their experiences of moving from A to B. So that year was I feel very important in informing me on these active travel systems. And then on the right hand side you've got my daily route in and out of Bosham and Chichester, and I'd happily be challenged on this, but I think I ride those miles more than any. I'm in and out of Chichester a couple of times a day, if not more, for work or school clubs or other events, and I feel confident to commentate on the challenges and the intricacies on that stretch from Bosham to Chichester. So I mentioned the concern around local coverage, really, and I think this really brings home the importance of getting this right. This statement is taken from a local website, which I understand has been set up for all the right reasons, and I admire the work that has gone into setting up this resource. But I think it's irresponsible to for certainly this appeared in the Chichester Observer, to state a fact, and to claim accurate predictions when we're talking about life or death statistics. There are rigorous statistical models to make such predictions, and to predict that there will be another 147 injuries over the next 10 years if we don't address safety is just not fact. And I think we need to be very careful on the commentary around this project. So this is the first stretch of interest, really, for the Bosham community, and forgive me for not looking at sections to the west, but I think that's really for other parish councils to do. So this starts at the Bosham Swan roundabout, and it shows the section between there and the Hillier Garden Centre. The first point to make about this design proposal is that we're missing a major new housing development here in the middle of the page, and it's that kind of approach to the design that really concerns me. The shared existing path will be significantly impacted by the construction of a large number of new homes on the Highgrove Farm site. So there's attention to detail here on the top of the screen with additional signage. And this is a case, I think, of just cosmetic change, and the absence of looking at the local need and what will be going on in the village over the next few years. Section is between Checker Lane and the Fishbourne diversion, and it is a diversion because at that point the cyclists are sent north around the houses, and the biggest concern here is the proposal for a shared use path, and I'll come back to that idea a couple of times in the presentation. It's simply not going to work, and I'll explain the reasons for that on the next few slides. And then we've got the final section of interest really for Bosham users, and that's around the Barrack Cycle area, to the left of the screen, and I would say the Chichester city centre on the right hand side, but actually the project doesn't get anywhere near the Chichester city centre. It stops at the Tesco footbridge by Bishop Luffer. So there's questions there around connectivity. It doesn't connect with the city centre, and I'll explain why connectivity is actually an even more important issue in the villages along the route. But again, you've got an image on the top left of the screen showing some solar lighting, and this is just another case of cosmetic changes, absolute waste of money. People don't use that section of cycle path at the moment. They certainly don't use it during the night, and the addition of solar lighting along there is really not going to enhance that section in any way. So there's some very strange ideas in my view as somebody who cycles this daily. This is on the way out of the subway, on the east side of Fishbourne village, and it highlights to me the imbalance really that the project has taken. There was a label on the previous slide explaining how there would be signs to stop cyclists at this point and give way to the traffic on the left, and then the stretch beyond here into towards the green footbridge at Bishop Luffer is classified as a currently safe stretch of road. Well, firstly, my question is why would, and I do as a cyclist, I have to stop here because the drivers leave exiting from the housing estate on the left hand side of the screen don't do a check over their right shoulder, so you have to check because you're aware that vehicles aren't going to give way to you there. But why the emphasis on the cyclist again to slow down, to break their journey? This is a straight piece of road that cyclists should have priority on. The other concern about this stretch is about halfway down, where you may see a black car pulling out onto the road. That hasn't been flagged at all in the design proposals, and although this is a 20 mile per hour zone and it feels pretty safe to ride along here, that junction is actually, along with the Salt Hill Road junction, that's probably the most hazardous part of my journey. Often the case that the car again doesn't give way to the cyclist and just continues its path out of that junction. And that's a really dangerous point on the journey. And again, it's been completely overlooked by the design team. Sorry. Being quite blunt about the situation, the design does not meet the objectives that Highways England have set out. The objective to enable growth in journeys made by active modes along the A259 by providing a high quality infrastructure. The design doesn't meet that objective. There will not be a growth in journeys, unfortunately, given this package, because it's not a high quality cycling infrastructure. The second objective, to create a consistent and safe route. The route is not consistent, and I will demonstrate why a shared path will result in that, along with so many other points along the way that do not provide a consistent, and more importantly than feeling that you can enjoy and flow through a ride, the safety aspect is not up to standard. And the final point taken from the road investment strategy of Highway England is that there should be connectivity to support economic activity, improving journey quality, safety, reliability, joining communities, and moving towards a low carbon economy. Well, again, the delivery of this project in its current form will not meet any of those aims. And if we look to the gear change document published in 2020 by the government, it was a bold vision to make England a great walking and cycling nation, and it made for some really good reading. And within that document, the summary principles taken from the local transport note LTN 120 really contradicts a lot of what we saw in the virtual workshops a couple of weeks ago. The preliminary design details simply do not satisfy the principles detailed in that most recent of government documents. And here are some of those extracts from the LTM 120 guidelines. Each of the ones that I've picked out here are contradicted by the package that was presented in early February. It says that infrastructure should be accessible from everyone from 8 to 80, giving everyone the opportunity to cycle in and out of towns and cities. I'm afraid there is absolutely no way that this design allows for an 8-year-old, or indeed an 80-year-old, to safely move from A to B at any point along that stretch from Bosham to Chichester. And again, I encourage other parish councils to look in detail, as I have done. But my evaluation, based on the points the background that I've provided, mean that we do not have a route that is accessible for the young and the old. It's possibly okay for those fully able and fully experienced, and those who are prepared to take that risk each day, but it's certainly not suitable for the inexperienced young and the vulnerable older community, not to mention other identified groups that are classified as vulnerable commuters. The second point says that cycles must be treated as vehicles and not pedestrians. Cyclists must be physically separated from pedestrians. A shared pavement does not separate cyclists and pedestrians, and that's a key safety failure of this design. Cyclists must be physically separated from high volume traffic. Again, many points along the route mean that the cyclists are not physically separated from the traffic. It says, point 5, that the infrastructure should be designed for a significant number of cyclists and non-standard cycles. The aim being that thousands of cyclists will use such a scheme. I'm afraid that the package delivered is so far from being able to allow thousands of cyclists to cycle along between Emsworth and Chichester. Moving cycles on a two-way shared space at some of the commuter speeds, or indeed leisure cyclists with pedestrians in the mix, will not allow for high volume of cyclists in a safe way. Point 7, that largely cosmetic interventions will not be funded. There are numerous examples of simply cosmetic interventions in what we saw a couple of weeks ago. Very half-hearted attempts to deliver an improvement with no genuine impact. Point 8 says that the cycle infrastructure must join together, providing a holistic and connected network, and I'll talk about that connectivity shortly. It's absent, in my view. It's absent at the Chichester end of the project, which has to take into account another huge housing development around the Bishop Luffer area, but also more importantly, or as importantly for me, is the connectivity within the villages to the route. The cycle routes must flow feeling direct and logical. I will show some examples of the lack of flow, and that unfortunately that it fails in its directness, understandably in the Fishbourne area, but the flow of a cycle journey between Bosham and Chichester is not there. And the schemes must be easy and comfortable to ride. Again, I having experienced the design and rode the route, feeling what it would be like, it certainly doesn't feel easy. So what I did is I acted upon the LTM 120 summary principle, and it says that ideally all schemes will be designed by people who cycle regularly. But in every case, those design schemes should travel through the area on a cycle to understand how it feels. And it's about that feeling that is clearly absent from what we've heard and seen so far. There is no experience of what it is like to ride this route, let alone the experience of riding it for the last several years in my case, and I'm aware that there are many other cycle groups in the area who can provide that background. The most effective way to gain that understanding is to get out and cycle the route and observe the behaviour, and that's what I've been doing, and these are. Firstly, trying to get out of Bosham village is not currently an option for most families. It's been one of our biggest struggles as a car-free family, and it's a big reason as to why people's default setting is to jump in the car the moment they're out of the front door. Getting on the bikes or walking to the main road is currently not safe, and one of the biggest contributors to that is the speed within our villages. There is an ongoing reluctance by West Sussex County Council to entertain the idea of 20 mile per hour zones within residential settings, and it just needs to be as standard for these villages along the A259. If we're going to build a project that's encouraging 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds to use it, then there has to be that connectivity to the people's houses and where they live. You can see here both north and south side of the A259. They're dangerous roads for anybody to be on, let alone those vulnerable road users. To be the case in the 4 communities identified here along the route, stretching from on the left Emsworth to Southbourne to Bosham and then Fishbourne. Those densely populated areas are where the people are coming from who are going to be getting in and out of Chichester. The people who are currently driving their cars, often singly occupied cars, or driving children in and out of school several times a day. If those communities are 20-mile-per-hour zones, then people stand a chance of actually accessing the A259 active travel route. So that's my big call. Firstly, is that the local authorities with Highways England really need to recognise that disconnect, that the route is not used currently because it's not safe, but because people can't safely get to the route. And if we're going to get a package that does finally deliver a safe route, it's going to be a waste of everybody's time and energy and money if the people still can't safely get onto that route. So as standard, those communities must do more to provide safe travel around the village, and the parish councils are desperate to work with that goal, to put the time and energy into that. But the brick walls that are presented time and time again, I feel are just going to result in a disjointed network, where we may have a good route along the main artery between Emsworth and Chichester, but people still can't leave their homes and safely get onto it because the villages themselves are not safe to move around. And this is trying to leave relatively experienced cyclists. Just how scary it is, even within the village.
So across you go. Across you go. OG. Across you go. Go on, good girl.
Drivers here are really helping us out and playing their part, but at no point can you relax as you're trying to get to the A259, and this is within the village. This is where it should be safe for children to move around on scooters and bikes and by foot, and it's the reason why we're still getting the majority of people driving to the school gate rather than giving active travel a go. The villages do not support the relaxed and safe and enjoyable movement around by bike and by foot. And when we do get to the A259, we then come to our first challenge.
Across you go. OG. Across you go. Go on, good girl.
So this is part of the existing shared path, and you can see the unease of having to cross a junction like this with children. You're constantly aware of cars leaving the A259 from both directions, and it's an example of where there is no flow to the cycle route. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, and again it leads to a situation where you feel incredibly unsafe. So looking at the shared path idea, which is clearly a big aspect, a key aspect of the proposal, I considered the groups that are affected by that poor decision. Firstly, the commuters and the leisure cyclists. So these are the people who have already sacrificed a part of their day to not drive to work, or are exercising and training for all good reasons of being physically active and trying to stay healthy. So they're likely to be moving, generally the average speed is around 15 to 20 miles per hour. And what will happen with a shared path is those cyclists will unfortunately not use it. as I've observed in other places, and there's some footage from the east side of Chichester that I will show you shortly. Cyclists ignore the shared path because it involves them stopping every 10-20 meters for a private driveway, or having to negotiate a road crossing. And what that means is those cyclists are then occupying the driver's space, and that results in conflict. And understandably, drivers become frustrated and impatient, and we get to a situation of increased risk. So my prediction for commuters and leisure cyclists, which are obviously a significant number of the people that we're looking to engage and also recruit, of course, if we're trying to increase active travel numbers. My conclusion is that, and my prediction is that the route will not be used by those travelling at high speeds. And I come back to that speed. If we actually jump to the third group there, pedestrians, if you consider those speeds that commuters are travelling at, you cannot expect pedestrians to share that space, whether it's a lightweight commuter bike or a much heavier proposition of a cargo trike or an electric bike that doesn't make as much noise as a rattling old bicycle. These are moving at significant speeds, and to put a pedestrian on that shared space, if you're looking for high volume commuter traffic in both directions and you're asking pedestrians to share that space, the pedestrians quoted as up to the age of 80, and other vulnerable groups that I'm really pleased to see are fully involved in this process. That again results in increased risk. So there's two groups there that, in my view, the improvements have actually increased the risk factor for, in terms of what is already there. I believe we actually have a safer situation for those two groups. And indeed, for families and vulnerable cyclists, the second group here I've identified, my big concern here is that you don't get families cycling up and down the A259 at the moment, and the publicity of a new route, the draw of a safe passage into and out of town, and the benefits of active travel may initially draw many in. But what it will do is it will simply get lots of inexperienced cyclists into a dangerous situation, which presents lots of hidden driveways, two-way heavy cycle traffic, pedestrians, and lots of road crossings along the way. So rather than encouraging families and providing a safe route for them, you've actually put these vulnerable cyclists at increased risk also. Again, the existing situation is almost a better option to that, because at least it's so dangerous that people don't consider that route for their young children. But advertising and promoting a new safe route will draw those inexperienced people onto it, and as I say, again, we get a situation of increased risk. And finally, the consideration of the residents that live alongside the route. Just on the stretch, and you'll see from some of the photographs in a minute, we crossed 20 private driveways in under a mile. Some of which some houses have front doors that actually open straight on to what would be this really heavily used shared space, or that's the claim of the design team. So again, to try and visualize bicycles moving at speeds in excess of 15 miles per hour in both directions, with pedestrians within a metre of a front door, we again, for those residents along the A259, they are currently at less risk than they would be given the new project. That a continuation of that ride with my daughters from Bosham to Chichester, and again you can insert a significant crossing for cyclists here around this area, maybe not exactly where the new housing development will go. So immediately you're facing a less comfortable flowing route along this section, which becomes more dangerous because you're going to have to cross that heavily used exit point from the housing estate. Quite quickly on a tricky corner, there's the first drop shortly followed, and this is two properties shared. And then we have a bed and breakfast which has two routes in and out, again completely blocked at that point and at the second way in. A heavily used ham farm where we've got really heavy transport moving in and out, and again you have to break your journey. You have to be really aware of tractors and articulated lorries moving in and out of that junction. We come again on the existing path, but this is where the shared path is proposed for, and therefore riding the route in this way is really demonstrating what the user experience will be. Way after driveway, you can see that the current conditions are not much fun for cycling, and I think Posey's finally got a little bit fed up at that point. Just another demonstration of how difficult it has been to try and make a changed lifestyle choice, which should be much easier for families to do. And then on a nice stretch, this is a really nice part for a cyclist at the moment. It feels safe on this stretch of road, and just put up a little bit of segregation there, and we're absolutely happy and comfortable in our progress. But turning this area into a shared path, you're introducing all of these driveways I mentioned earlier, the front doors, with people opening their front door onto the pathway, more driveways butting right up to where the shed is proposed to go, and common problems with using the current cycle lane with people parking, and of late is an example of a development which will not be an isolated case currently on the corner of Salt Hill Road, which for the last 6 to 12 months has been a car park for contractors' vans and people working on that site. The bicycle lane is blocked daily, and the pavements for pedestrians. The pedestrians have to walk around the traffic there, and that's a kind of example of just not helping out people who are trying to do commute in a different way, and that's not without trying with interacting and working with the contractor, the developers, sorry. And even the local police force and the county council. There's no support there really, and it's very hard work moving in and out along this stretch through Fishbourne, and it has been for the last year. That does of course take the site here, which is the Salt Hill Road junction, which we've already mentioned, the tragic loss of Gina. Which was really felt within the Bosham community, and more so than any, passing Gina on my bike each day and saying good morning to her, and losing a fellow cyclist in that way was very tough, and I understand the Genus Cycle Lane project, and I admire the work, but as I said, that my concern there is around this project being informed by real experts and the cycle groups and the cycle forums that understand the movement along this route. And here is a comparison of that route between Bosham and not Chichester, because as I said, it doesn't reach Chichester, but the comparison is on the left from the Swan roundabout to the Tesco's footbridge, and it took 9 minutes to complete just under 4 kilometers on my bicycle on the road, so ignoring any cycle diversion or any shared pavement that would come into play. I stuck to the road, trying to mimic what a segregated cycle path would feel like, and as you can see there, it took just over 9 minutes. On the right hand side, having cycled back to the Swan roundabout and given it another go, I followed what would be a shared path, stopping when I felt I needed to in terms of safety, and I followed the diversion around the Roman Palace, and you can see that the difference in distance is really not significant, 3.72 to 3.98 kilometers. So it's not the added distance that cyclists would feel hard done by here, and actually it's not really even the time. I think that there's a 3-minute 20 or so difference there between the journey time, and I think travelling from Bosham to Chichester, sacrificing 3 minutes or so, I don't think it is too much of a sacrifice to make for any cyclist just trying to enjoy getting to work or getting to school. But the significant outcome of that experience was not to do with the time or the distance, but it was to do with the safety, and the fact that it felt much safer to be flowing on the road without having to stop and check the blind driveways and to wait at a road crossing and to go round behind just after Barrack Cycle around right-angled bike lane turns. The whole experience, the 10-minute give or take experience of both rides, felt much more comfortable and safe on the first run when I wasn't trying to mimic the experience of a shared use path. So I went to find an example of a shared pavement on the other side of Chichester, and again I rode the route twice. The first ride, in this case on the left hand side, was the shared path. So this is very much what is being proposed for a considerable section between Bosham and Chichester, and you can see that the distance, obviously no difference because the cycle path runs directly alongside Stane Street, the road in question, from Magdalen down to just around the Chichester Park Hotel roundabout at the Sainsbury's end of town. So we're talking about 3/4 of a mile, and you can see that the time difference there does become a factor, because almost 2 minutes time difference in under a mile soon mounts up when you're considering cycling from Southbourne into Chichester. So although at face value the difference between 5 minutes 6 and 3 minutes 23 doesn't seem a sacrifice to make, when you consider that's just over a kilometre of travel, that time becomes significant. But again, it wasn't the time loss that was the most noticeable takeaway from that experience. It was once again how unsafe it felt to be on a shared path, and this was at a very quiet time. But having to stop again at driveways and junctions, at no point were you able to relax. Strangely, on the road section, which only took 3 minutes, it was a very calm experience, and it felt like an enjoyable journey. Obviously, again, would be made much more enjoyable and considerably safer by segregating that route along on the road, but at least it was direct and it was uninterrupted and comfortable, and I felt safe. Shared pavements do not work in the wrong setting, and I'm afraid that the stretch between Bosham and Chichester is very much the wrong setting for such a design. This is the section of shared use path along Stane Street, and as I mentioned, in less than a mile, you pass 13 driveways and you cross 7 significant junctions, whether they are housing developments, the West Hampnet Tip, Chichester Water Sports Centre, and other Chichester District Council work sites. The space is wonderful, especially when you're the only person using it, which is pretty much always the case when I've been to this side of town. You don't see cyclists or pedestrians using this shared space. Any cyclists I've seen are on the road itself, and it just emphasises the 30-mile-per-hour limit there, and a car going considerably more than that. But it just shows that a shared path is not going to get the intended use. For this reason, you have to stop, you have to check, and then you're okay to move on, until about 50 metres later, when you come to another significant junction, and again your journey is broken. It's uncomfortable to have to step off the bike and pause and look around, and for an experienced cyclist doing that, they can have the confidence to move on. With children, that becomes a very stressful experience, and it's not something you can do time after time, and this is less than a mile. We're yet to see and observe the high volume of cyclists and pedestrians that this route was aiming to introduce to active travel. In fact, we haven't seen one in this clip yet. There's a major site access, and 20 metres later we have another one. I believe that's the Chichester District Council site, and we've got a couple more blind site entrances coming up on the left hand side. And that was a really dull 5 minutes and 7 seconds. I'm sure you'll agree, having watched that with me. It wasn't much fun watching it, I understand, and it certainly wasn't much fun riding it. And again, the idea of readjusting the balance between cyclists and motor car users. If you did have the commitment to make it to this point on the outskirts of Chichester, which I have done with my children a few times, having cycled down through Goodwood, you're then faced with a high-speed roundabout exit onto a dual carriageway, which again is a really terrible experience for a cyclist, but for a cyclist with a family, it shows that the project and all of that money and resources that have gone on to building that shared path breaks down at this point, because there's no connectivity moving forwards from here. And if you ever see cyclists, much like we observed with the West Sussex County Council farcical design with the orange bollards and the COVID pop-up lanes a few months ago, cyclists were not using the poor design, and the fallout from that was a further breakdown in relationships between cyclists and drivers, and the reaction towards the cycling community was really upsetting for a mess that was designed and implemented by poor design and lack of understanding of local need. And that's very much what I fear for the A259. So as we approach the hour, and if you've made it this far, I admire your commitment to the project. I present really three standout conclusions from my evaluation. I've only had the time to consider between Bosham and Chichester, and I would really encourage others and other parish councils to maybe become more involved and analyse the sections around their communities. But I just am hugely underwhelmed by what I've heard and seen so far, and more than this, I feel that the design proposal actually makes the stretch between Bosham and Chichester potentially more unsafe if we move ahead with the ideas that I'm hearing and seeing at this point, and that would be a quite extraordinary achievement, to spend so much money and time to deliver something that is more unsafe than a route that has been evaluated to be extremely unsafe in its current form. I think that would be some achievement. Secondly, my standout conclusion is around connectivity, and that we can spend a considerable amount of resources on the A259 project, trying to improve the route between Chichester and Emsworth. But if residents within Bosham, Southbourne, Emsworth, Fishbourne are still do not have the confidence to connect with that route, because cycling within and walking within and scooting from the front door to the A259 provision does not feel safe, then again we've missed a significant point there. The parish councils are ready to work hard, I think, to improve the security within villages, and some of the ideas are extremely low budget in relation to some of the ideas being put forward in the Highways England project. Are very easily implemented, and they can actually realise the summary principle 17 from the LTN 120, which states the simplest, cheapest interventions can be the most effective. and I think there's a real lack of creativity and willingness to embrace a more creative and cost-effective approach to making our villages more enjoyable places for active transport. And my final conclusion is for the stretch between Bosham and Chichester, and again I encourage further comment from people along the route in other sections, but for the stretch between Bosham and Chichester, shared paths are not an option. Cyclists need to be physically separated from pedestrians and the high volume of motor traffic. Again, these are all clear requirements of the LTM 120, and for Bosham to Chichester this simply means a segregated bike lane both north and south of the A259, and the argument that the space is not there just doesn't sit, and that's been demonstrated by other documents that I've looked at over the last year. I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the conversation. I'm easy to get hold of through the Bosham Parish Council website. If you'd like to comment or any comments around the presentation are absolutely welcome. And I hope to support the process in the next few months as we work towards a safe route between Chichester and Emsworth, and we importantly connect the communities and allow them to use that route and increase active travel in this area. Thanks very much for your time.